Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're here for the 2023 USRowing Northwest Masters Regional Championships Coaches and Coxswains meeting. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So this meeting is recorded. We'll go ahead and post that tomorrow, the recording of this, and then we'll go ahead and post the slide deck tonight as well. So if you need to send this to any of your coxswains or teammates, feel free to do so starting tomorrow. If you do have any questions too, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A. We'll address all questions at the end of the presentation. Some quick agenda items. So we'll go ahead and start off. I'll talk about some key takeaways and introductions, preview of our registration schedule and venue schedule. We'll review your pre-arrival checklist. Then I'll go ahead and pass it to our chief referee, Dee McComb, for a referee welcome, traffic patterns, USRowing rules of rowing, and unsportsmanlike conduct. And then we'll close out with Christine and Mike from the LOC to discuss some venue information, and then again, answer any questions that you all have. So a quick intro, once again, thank you for joining us, and we're super excited to host this regatta after many years of not having this regatta for various reasons. So we're excited to finally see you all in person again. As a top priority and reminder that safety both on and off the water continues to be the top priority at all USRowing events. So everybody is responsible for information that we do and review in this meeting in our entry packet. Tonight, from USRowing on this call, my name is Sarah McAuliffe. I'm the Director of Competition at USRowing. We'll also have Meg Varco, who is our membership coordinator, who's going to be joining us and will issue all of your wristbands. From the LOC OAR, we have Mike and we have Christine here. And then our chief and deputy referees, we have Dee McComb that will lead us. So a quick review of schedule. So starting off your trailer arrival window. So Thursday, June 22nd, starting at 9 a.m., the LOC is accepting trailers arriving. And if you haven't already, I think most of you have, but the LOC has been reaching out to teams to get an idea of when they're arriving and explaining the best way for them to drop off trailers in boats and get that as organized as possible. We did send out information today that reviewed again the trailer parking plan and the boat laydown plan. So we have a great amount of space over at the Lowell area of this regatta. So where we'll be launching, where you'll be living throughout the regatta full weekend. And then we also have additional space just across the waterway on the Dexter side. And that's where our trailers are going to be housed for the regatta. So there's a full plan. I'm not going to steal the LOC's thunder for the work that they've done on that front, but they'll be able to explain it more and address any questions that you have. USRowing registration tent. So we are officially underneath the pavilion at Dexter Lake. We will start to open Thursday from 3 to 6 p.m. So if you do get there early and you want to come in, you as a coach or you as like the athlete representative for your team, we can go ahead and give you your packet with wristbands. Everybody does need to check in with us because we do need to ensure that everybody does have a USRowing wristband there. You'll get your bound numbers at the docks when you're racing. So really our key point of contact is to make sure you guys are all compliant as well. Going through again, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we'll be open on Friday starting at 7 a.m. and going to the end of racing, and then 6:30 a.m. starting both Saturday and Sunday. If you have any lineup changes, if you need to scratch for whatever reason, if you have any USRowing questions, please do come to this area and we'd be happy to help. For practice, a reminder that we do not have practice at this regatta. And then for weigh-in windows. So if you are weighing in, please do refer to the wording in our entry packet, but you are weighing in once throughout the entirety of the regatta. Here are our windows here. So 6:30 to 10 a.m. on Friday, Saturday is 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and Sunday is 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. We'll go ahead and post our final schedule tomorrow evening. I know I've been talking back and forth with quite a bit of you of just some like last minute changes throughout your clubs. So we'll get that out with all of those changes tomorrow evening. So a quick pre-arrival checklist. So these are the 5 things that you all as athletes, as coaches, as teams just need to be sure that are complete prior to arriving. So 1, just making sure you've reviewed the USRowing Code of Conduct. Have you reviewed the event entry packet? Are your athletes up to date on their USRowing memberships? Are your athletes, coaches, and support staff safe sport compliant? Are your coaches and support staff on the Regatta Central roster? So let me just take a pause here for a second. So one, in regards to memberships, if you do have any questions of if you're compliant with memberships, please do email members@usrowing.org. They'll be able to take care of all of that. Sometimes there are duplicate accounts for one individual, so we'll be able to clear that up. And then in regards to safe sport, if you have questions on if you've completed the right thing, if you've done the right training, whatever it may be, again, please do email members@usrowing.org. This note right here, so are your coaches and support staff on the Regatta Central roster? If you go on to Regatta Central and you are the one registering your team, on the left-hand side, you're going to see a panel, and one of the buttons says safe sport on it. If you are a coach or support staff, so this is anyone that's like bringing oars down to the dock around your team, please do put their names into that list. That ensures that we will have a wristband ready for them once you guys pick everything up, and ensures everybody's compliant on site too. And then finally has your team pager entry fees. So please do make sure that those are paid prior to arriving to registration. If not, we won't be able to give you your packets there. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Dee McComb to do a referee welcome.
Well, welcome to everybody. This is really kind of fun. It's going to be interesting for those of you as competitors and athletes that are going to show up, and it's going to be a little bit of a different arrangement for our racing this coming weekend, and also for the referees who have been used to coming to that venue and working the earlier regattas that we have kind of become accustomed to. So this weekend we'll have 14 plus referees that will be on hand. They will all be from the Northwest region and include 2 umpires from British Columbia that will be joining us on our exchange program. So we've got a little over 100 years total between all of us. So I think we've got you taken care of. The whole primary purpose for why we're here is safety and fairness. And that's what we're going to be reviewing as we kind of go through talking about the roles of the referees for everybody's sake. We want to make sure that everybody has a fair and an equal opportunity to win, place, or advance as we go through the regatta. Can I do the slide, or you're going to do my slides? Ha! Well, yes, you should know and understand the rules of rowing. Referees are quite familiar with them, but basically there are some key ones that get worked through at every regatta. One of them has to do with when you're coming down to launch, that your heel ties are strong and secure, and they're at least no more than 3 inches, and the bow ball is firmly affixed. The bow ball is critical because many of you have heard stories about collisions, and if the bow ball is not in place, then you really have a dangerous weapon at the bow of the boat. And heel ties are important. We know that there are competitors who seem to feel that the minute they launch, they should undo their heel ties, so they have the ability to really get up on the catch. But it's important because if a boat should flip, and we have an awful lot of sculling boats these days, you know, since COVID, a lot of the crews and the clubs have wound up getting folks who are really enamored of sculling. So increase in those events makes it all the more important, especially on singles and doubles. If there's a flip, we want to be sure that you can get out. There's nothing more worrisome than having somebody go over, and because their heel ties were not secure, your heels are not going to come out of your foot stretchers. We will do a visual and a hands-on check. It will be random, but we are going to be checking that. We also are going to be checking credentials, especially Coxswains at launch. So what Sarah said is very true, that if all of a sudden you're going to be making some switches in lineups, especially Coxswains, you need to let us know, or you may wind up not being able to be eligible for the event. And let the race information, give the race information when you come down to launch. It's key. Write it on your wrist, write it on your knee, put it on a piece of tape, masking tape, and tape it to your knee, whatever you need to do in order to make sure that you have the correct information so we can give you the correct bow numbers. They're critical. They're going to be alphanumeric. So if you're coming for the B Bravo race and you're B4, you don't want to wind up with somebody giving you a D4 because they didn't understand what race you were in, and then you miss your race. It's also critical that we get the bow numbers back. We're going to talk about that a little bit later as well, but we only have so many when we go through the alphabet, and in order to be able to continue to give these bow numbers out throughout the weekend, we need to get them back, so no souvenirs can be kept. Also, once you've launched or you're coming down to launch and you find that there's some kind of broken equipment, make sure that you alert the nearest referee near you or safety marshal, because we will have marshals out in the area. Everybody will have radios so that if it's something we can accommodate to be able to get you out a replacement or bring it down to the dock, have a referee run it out, we're perfectly helpful. We'd want to make sure that you have every opportunity to row. So if something happens while you're on the water and it's a concern, then get the attention of the nearest referee near you so we can deal with it. On the water, essentially, if a referee gives you an instruction, we're looking to make sure that you heard it. Very often, once you've launched, you're focused on getting out to the race, getting into the warm-up area, figuring out where you are in relationship to everything. But it's important that if a referee is trying to get you to do something, that you listen to them. The other things that are listed here, when we go over how the race is set up and how the traffic patterns are set up for this weekend, you won't really find yourself rowing very close to the course while a race is in progress. But if you should happen to be in a race is in progress, please stop rowing, and as a courtesy, you know, for distracted purposes, and also because depending on the size of boat, you can leave a wake. Not stopping on the start line. I think that won't be probably an opportunity this time around, but the point is to not, if you're trying to watch the next race and you get onto the start line, then you can affect how the aligner is being able to see the bows of the boats to be able to make sure that they're fair in lining them up. Finish line is the same thing. Once you've finished your race, you're going to immediately kind of turn and get out of the way. I'm not exactly sure what our centers are going to be, but sometimes if it's necessary, we're going to have a race coming down right away and it's necessary for you to get out of the way. Don't sit on the finish line because the electronic timing and so on gets affected by being able to clearly see the others. The power stroke sequence is probably something we aren't going to do too much concern about this time around. Wait till you see the traffic pattern. But again, in any other normal regatta, it's important that you do your power courses in the warm-up area. For warm-up, you'll see what the warm-up pattern is, and you need to follow it and pay attention to what the warm-up marshals say, especially when it comes to whether or not you feel like you're going to need to cut through to the other side in order to make sure you get to the start on time. So it's going to be important, again, to go back to the instruction section. Also, do not, Dexter is it's a big lake, it's a big reservoir. And so essentially sticking with the warm-up area is important because we aren't going to be able to have safety for you when you're out of the warm-up pattern. Sprint starts. So for those of you, I know that we have some novices that will be racing, but for most of you, hopefully you have experienced some starts. The starter is the one who basically is in charge of the start area. They will invite you to come on to the start and lock on your stake boat. We will have, they're really not boats this time around. They're more like stake platforms, but there will people on those platforms that will work with you to hold your stern so that you can get your point and be ready to get down the race course. Where Dexter is located, we do, the start is probably in a vulnerable area for some wind. So it's going to be important for you to know how to scull. And that means you're not going to row. You're not going to ask your bow or your two or whatever it is. You're not going to try to row yourself to get your point. You're going to need to scull by taking an oar and from the rower behind you and moving that oar close to the shell and use it to kind of push the shell sideways the way that you need to go against the wind. So make sure between now and then you have the discussion with your coach because it's important. We can't take the time to make sure that you know how to scull when you're on the starting blocks. You need to be locked on before 2 minutes. If you're not locked on by then, we may give you a warning. It's necessary to know that 2 warnings and you're excluded. So for example, if you get a warning for a traffic pattern violation in the warm-up area, which is entirely possible, and you come over to the start and you are late to start, that's also a warning, and that could exclude you from ever racing the race that you want to do. So you need to make sure that you're following instructions and that you get there prior to be able to lock on before the 2 minutes. And then the race will start anytime after that. We use an announced start. So the starter will begin to call out the names of the crews, and they'll start in lane 1 and go through the crews as they're locked on. And then they will basically say attention, raise a red flag, and drop the flag and say go. And that's the routine. That's me, sorry. And where'd I go? I'm here somewhere. Drop the flag. It's important to go on the movement of the flag because of the location of the start tower behind the starters. You may not hear the word go. So make sure that if you're in a stern coxed boat, that your stroke is looking at it, that you have a system where you can see the movement of the flag, and away you go. One of the things that's very difficult is if you are not ready, if there's something wrong, is don't go. The worst that will happen in that particular instance is that we will stop the race and we'll call everybody back and we'll find out why. But your worst in that instance would be a warning for, I don't know, if somebody's hat fell off or something like that. If it's a real reason and you honestly have somebody, a jump slide, whatever it is, at that point, then we'll restart the race. But you cannot, if there's something that you didn't like about the start when it started, but you went anyway, and you get to the end of the course, you cannot object to the start at the finish. So just keep that in mind. We don't recognize hands exactly, used to in the rules. We would hold up until whatever the situation was resolved itself. We will look at someone who has their hand up to make sure we understand why. If they don't like their point and they're trying to finesse it to within a quarter of an inch, we may or may not pay attention to that one. But we will look at the hands, but we don't recognize hands to the point that we're forced to wait until you're happy. If you leave the start, like we said, you can no longer object to it. The breakage zone is the first 100 meters or about 20 seconds. And breakage is honest to goodness breakage. It is not a jump slide, believe it or not. It is not, my foot came out of the foot stretcher and I'm not able to row. It's actually you had an oarlock break, or you had some kind of equipment failure that caused you to have to stop rowing. In which case we will stop the race and deal with whatever the issue is at that time. The starter's discretion, because if it gets too windy or we're having trouble locking on, things like that, the starter can decide to go to what's known as a quick start. And in order to do that, they announce it and they say, this will be a quick start. And then they will say, quick start, again, attention, raise the red flag, drop the flag quickly, and say go. And that's just so we don't have to take the time to go through announcing all of the crews. And it means that you have to get ready sooner to be able to go. Next slide. After you're off and racing and you're headed down to the finish, you may have a referee who may come up behind you because you're essentially not staying within your lane lines, in which case it may appear that you're about to cross over, or that maybe your oars have even crossed over and you are now in possibility of interfering with a crew in the next lane, or someone may be coming into you doing the same thing. So a referee may move up behind you to give instructions. What they do is they basically come up behind your boat, they call out your crew name, they raise a white flag, and then they drop the flag in the direction that they want you to go. They will not guide you, coach you, tell you to go to port, tell you to go to starboard. Their job is basically, hopefully somebody is watching, either your bow person or your stern person, to be able to know they're there. I'm now on to unsportsmanlike conduct, which usually isn't a problem among masters. We usually find sometimes that younger rowers have an uncommon conversation and cheer at each other in different ways. But it's important to know that sportsmanlike conduct is critical. And that means you can't have profanities, disrespect, harassment directed at another crew, at a referee, or even an LOC volunteer. And essentially, we have the power to exclude an individual. We have a power to disqualify an individual and or disqualify an entire crew for the actions of a person. And we can, at the very end of being awful, disqualify an entire team. But we don't want to have to do that for any reason. So we're just asking for the kind of respect in sports that you're used to giving to yourself.
The apologies, I didn't mean to jump that slide there. We can go back to. Do you want to go back? There we go. Sorry
Okay,
about
well,
that.
finish is going to be real quick. Essentially, when you're headed down the course, as you finish, you will hear a horn in the distance. Just row through the large orange buoys. You may or may not hear a horn sometimes. So there will be large orange buoys at the finish line. That may or may not even be the finish. I mean, in all likelihood, the orange buoys will be a little bit beyond the finish. So the fact that you keep rowing until you know you've gone through the big orange buoys is going to make sure that you finish the race. There is nothing worse than being on the finish line and seeing somebody stop rowing because they thought they heard a horn somewhere and they didn't. So once you've gone through, if you honestly have a concern over something that may have happened on the water during the race, then you need to raise your hand and the referee will come over and talk to you about what your concern is and or your question. We want to know from you, when we talk to you, what you believe happened, what impact it had on you, and what you'd like us to do about it. And so there will be a conversation between you and the referee will give you what their decision is on the water. with regard to what your issue is. If you are okay with that, great. And they may take, some actions. They may not exclude another crew for interfering. They may or may not make any kind of adjustments, or they may say they're not going to. If you are not happy with what the referee said, you have the opportunity to tell them that you are going to protest. And a formal protest then must be filed within an hour after you get off the water, along with $50 and a written explanation complaint submitted to the chief judge, which is the referee that's in charge at the finish, or to the chief referee, which is myself. And then at that point, if there's a filed protest, we then have to convene a jury of 3 referees to be able to discuss the matter, take testimony, et cetera, et cetera. It's a small jury that considers all the elements, but that's how the process would happen. But if you have an objection on the water, make sure you raise your hand, because if you get off the water and start complaining about things, that's not the time that you are able to really file a protest. I think that takes us to the race day traffic pattern. And I know that this is what's unusual about this particular traffic pattern that has not been happening in the other regattas that have been held on this venue. We are trying very hard through this traffic pattern to make sure that hopefully people are able to get where they need to go, get off back to the course, and line up for the start, and all of that without having too much of a chance of crossing and colliding. So essentially, if you're launching, you can see the blue arrow on this closest to the race course. You will launch from the beach, and you will head around behind the start and into the warm-up pattern. So the warm-up pattern will be off there to the side, and it will be in a counterclockwise circle. If you are launching and you are, I don't want to say late to start, but you haven't been able to get launched in time to do any kind of a decent warm-up, there will be the ability of staging everybody for their race kind of right behind and beside the start. This is a big lake, so it looks closer than it will actually be. So you will be able to do that as well. You'll either get into the warm-up pattern, or you may be able to peel off and get right into staging for your race that's being done right there behind the start. Once you have completed your race, you can see the red areas starting at the finish. And so now you will head away from the finish and back down into the warm-up pattern. So you will come down the outside of the warm-up pattern, heel off at the bottom, and in a wide arc, head back toward the beach for recovery. We don't have any crossing marshals per se, because you're not going to cross the course. And hopefully you will not have a situation where you need to cross the warm-up area itself, but there will be warm-up marshals, there will be a start marshal, there will be a finish marshal, and then the referees will be, of course, on the course at various positions. So you may have some questions when we get done with this, and then we'll move to kind of talk about the location of other things. I think Christine's going to take it from here, aren't you?
Yeah, so let's go back to that. Do you want to talk about the secondary dock now or later?
We can talk about that if you're comfortable with this map up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you will be parking your trailers over at Dexter Park, which is across the lake from Lowell. Yes, where the circle is. So if in the course of the 3 days of racing, you are finished with a boat, you're not going to be using it anymore, we recommend that you row it over to Dexter and trailer it there because it's going to be kind of chaotic on Sunday. But you can't use that dock to get onto the lake for racing. So I guess so you would come off the finish and then follow the path to the secondary dock. We will have a low dock there so you can dismount easily. Okay.
And if that's the case, you need to be able to, depending on when you do it, notify either someone at control or someone or the finish marshal who will have a radio so that we know when we see this stray shell that starts to row across that they, we keep an eye on them and that they've notified us that they're going to be going over to take their boat out of the water.
And just to hop in, there's one question in the chat before we move on. How many meters is our warm-up loop right here, Christine?
It's roughly 1,000.
Yeah, that looks like more than 1,000, but the idea is that it's just about 1,000.
Thank you. I'll hop to the next slide if you all are okay with it.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to talk about, unless we're going to get to it, is hot seating.
Yes, good idea.
We're going to do hot seating in essentially 2 places. If you're going to hot seat a boat, then the boat can come when it finishes its race, the boat can come down to the OAR dock, which is just there at the finish. And the rowers can be exchanged there. And then they can move back out into the warm-up pattern and therefore get back to the start that way. If you're going to hot seat people, then we're going to ask that you finish this way and come like you would normally be returning to the beach. And we'll have a hot seat kind of area that the dock master or beach masters can pull you into, and then you can exchange. You can have your rowers get out and get into the new boat and then launch and quickly get back to the start.
Great. There's one other thing. If you are a single rower and you're car topping your boat to Dexter, you will park at the boathouse and you can launch from our OAR dock into the warm-up pattern. There is a secondary control commission there.
But they will not have bow
only
numbers.
Prior permit. Pardon?
They will not have bow numbers there though. So we'll have to figure out if we have a single, how we're going to get their bow numbers to them. Because
I did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can do that, but we'll just have to kind of logistically let them know how we're going to get their bow numbers to them.
Okay. Hence the prior permission to do so. Yes.
And there's
Okay.
one question in here too, just to clarify. So there's a question about if you are going to go to the Dexter Park side, can you provide that information at registration or should you communicate that on the water? You're more than welcome to communicate everything at registration, but you have to communicate it on the water as well, just as like that has to happen. If I find out at registration, I'll just compile a list and share that with Dee, but just as a blanket rule, please do make sure that you alert the referee or the marshal on the water as well. Awesome. So we're going to hop into safety on the venue and our evacuation plan.
Okay, so we will have first aid on site. The 911 dispatch will contact Lowell Fire if necessary, and they're very close, but they will not be, the EMTs will not be on site. In the very unlikely case that we have to evacuate the site, there is a dirt path that goes from the uphill side of the start area towards Lowell, and would recommend that you follow that evacuation route back to the high school, which will be the assembly point. So Also, that dirt path can be used to get to the venue if you park at the high school. So keep this map in mind. You may find it useful, keeps you off the road if you're walking from the high school. All right, this is the venue map for Lowell Park. The red flag denotes the landing area and the green flag denotes the launching area. If you have rowed at Dexter before, it's the opposite of what we've done in the past for our covered bridge regatta. So just keep that in mind. The medals will be distributed on the beach in a little corner of the near the water. You can see where first aid is located also near the water. We will have several food vendors available up on the west side of the park. Yep, in that area, and as well as a beer garden and ice cream and coffee. Toilets and dumpsters will be distributed on both ends of the parking lot. The headquarters is at the picnic shelter or pavilion at the top of the diagram there. And we will also have our OAR information tent located in that general vicinity as well. We will have a potable water station where you can fill up your water bottles at the permanent bathrooms. Yeah, that water will be potable, so you don't have to use your plastic disposable bottles. The rectangles that you see distributed throughout the venue are how we've laid out where you will put your tents and your boats. The rectangles are about 80 feet long, 20 feet wide, and we will have them marked out by numbers at the venue. It's going to be a little crowded, so we didn't want to have a free-for-all for where you set up your tents and lay out your boats. There are a few for the very large clubs. We're going to pre-assign where we put you, and then the smaller ones, when you come to registration, we can talk. You can pick your camp spot, as it were, from the numbered list. What else? What am I forgetting? I think that's it. Oh, the shuttle. There will be a shuttle that makes a circuit from Lowell to Dexter and stopping at the high school along the way. They'll just make a continuous circuit. It probably will take about half an hour to get from one end of the circuit to the other end of the circuit, maybe less. But they do have to stop at the high school and load and unload and so on. So the shuttle stop is up near the parking tent. Please use the shuttles. They keep you off the road. They're really there as a safety feature. The road is a 55-mile-an-hour 2-lane country road, and it's really not safe to walk on it. I think that's it, unless people have questions. We'll talk about the parking next. There is no spectator parking on site. We will issue 2 parking passes for each club. They will have your names on them. And then if you have more than 2 vehicles, you can park them at Lowell High School or at Dexter State Park for free. Our parking plan is a little complex, but because of the number of trailers that we expect, you will be driving into Lowell State Park, leaving the trailer there as long as it takes to unload it on Thursday or possibly into the Friday morning. When your trailer is unloaded, you will take the trailer over to Dexter Park, where it will stay until you want to load it back up again. Debbie Cadigan is our parking coordinator, and she should have been in touch with you by now. If you have not heard from Debbie, please notify us so that we can get you connected. She will orchestrate the timing of the parking. it's really important that we know when you intend to arrive and later on when you intend to depart so that we can keep it not insane. So there will be the shuttle bus that runs a continuous loop between Dexter and Lowell. You need to pick up anything over at Dexter. Also, because you will be given 2 parking passes, your team vehicles are free to come and go from Lowell to pick up stuff over at Dexter, to move people, whatever. So you can use that as well. And please do not park on the road. It's really tempting. You will see people do it, but the road is narrow and fast and dangerous, and we'd like to keep you safe.
Thanks, Christine. There is one just comment in the or Q&A, and Mike did type it out, but I think it's worth saying. So there's one person here that's asked, how much time do we have for trailer unloading? It's likely that the trailer will arrive several hours before enough people are there to unload it. And Mike explained this in the chat too, but that is okay. We are planning for that. As Mike noted, there's close to enough room for everyone, but you know, this is more of an effort of making sure people are comfortable and have enough space too. So you do have time if it takes a little bit to get people there and unload. But Debbie, as Christine mentioned, Debbie is your go-to person for all of those details. So please just communicate that to Debbie, and then the LOC has done a great job of accommodating all of that.
Right. So it was a balancing act. If we allowed all trailers to park there, there'd be no room for your team vehicles. So it was a balancing act to make it easy for you to enter and leave the park with your team people and stuff, but not take up all the space with trailers.
Mm-hmm. And Christine, there's one question too. Where is the parking for vehicles with a parking pass? Is there an allotted area, or is it just by their boats?
Well, at first it will be by their boats. We also have some parking up near the picnic shelter and beyond the picnic shelter, and we'll find places to put people while the trailers are there. After the trailers leave, there'll be a lot more space to park team vehicles. Yeah, so we will direct you to where to park. So yeah, there are several little spots that team vehicles can park and be out of the way. There will be several people on site in orange vests with a parking logo on them to help you park. And I just wanted to give you an overview of the whole situation. It is a big lake. So Lowell is the town where the high school is located, and that is where you can park. Then you can take that trail that goes to Lowell State Park. You have to walk on the road for a little bit, and then when you get to the cemetery, you cut through the cemetery and pick up the dirt trail that gets you off the fast part of the road. And I will have that signed so you can figure out where to make those cuts. The second parking area is on the opposite side of the lake at Dexter Park. And you have to drive out of Lowell, get back on Highway 58, head towards Eugene to get to that parking area. You cannot walk across the dam, so there's no way to make that shortcut. So yeah, that's kind of the big lay of the land. Any questions?
Great, thanks, Christine. There's a couple of questions in here. Debbie's contact information. She has a parking question. I will try and go ahead and put that in the chat right now. Let me stop sharing my screen.
She's told me sharing her phone number is fine. Or you can, she actually prefers to be texted. The other thing I didn't mention is if you have not been able to get hold of Debbie for whatever reason, do not go to Lowell, go to Dexter and park there and text Debbie, and she will tell you what the situation is at Lowell. And the reason for that is, again, that road is narrow and fast, and we don't want trailers stacking up, blocking traffic. So if you have not heard from Debbie, go directly to Dexter and text her. Oh, yeah, directly to Dexter and text Debbie.
Awesome. And Debbie is kind enough. She's in the chat right now, or in the Q&A, putting her phone number and email. So I'm just adding that to the chat so everybody can see. So big thank you to Debbie.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah. All right. I think these are all of our questions here. So like we said, oh, one more came in quickly. How long is the
Yeah, so
shuttle
how
ride?
long?
approximately?
It looks like Mike's gonna answer it. You know, realistically, it's probably 15 minutes, but I wouldn't count on that because it does have to stop at the high school. So don't cut it short if you need to get over there to race. I estimate about 30 minutes is the maximum that it would take from place to place. It's only about 3-4 miles, so half an hour is, you know, a long time, but still, they have to load up and unload and so on.
Mhm. Perfect. Well, thank you all. We'll go ahead and post this slide deck on Regatta Center.
Can I offer one more thing that we didn't talk about?
Sure.
Just real quick.
Certainly.
I wanted to talk about weigh-ins. I mean, this is a Coxswains meeting as well, so weigh-ins will be up at the pavilion. Essentially, we are expecting the Coxswains to anticipate whether or not they will need to carry weight. And if so, to please bring something that comes pretty close to whatever the weight is that you are going to have to carry. If it's absolutely necessary, we may be able to have some sand, but we're not going to have sand for everybody to count on coming and being able to have packages of tape wrapped sand wandering around all over the place. So we're looking for Coxswains to take that responsibility. It's important then, essentially, when we do check for it, which we will do either at the beginning of the race or the end of the race, depending on how my staffing goes. But essentially, it's important that the Control Commission will check to make sure that they have the right coxswain with the right boat that they're giving the bow number to, because that's how we'll get our information for checking on the coxswain's weights. So if you decided that you have some kind of an emergency and you need to fill in on another boat in your for the race in that afternoon, then you need to go see USRowing and make sure that you get that lineup changed so that we don't anticipate. Also, if you ran once for the weekend, so if you are not racing until Saturday, but you're there real early Friday morning, you can weigh in Friday morning, as long as you know all your races and you can put down everything. If you have an additional race, you're going to have to come back to us and make sure that we get you logged in for the additional race if you're picking one up during the weekend as well, so you get into the roster. That was my 2 cents worth for weighing in.
I'm happy you added that. Thank you. Yes, and that, again, there's just a couple comments here that applies for lightweights and coxswains. So the ruling applies for both. All right, awesome. Thank you all. We'll go ahead and post this, so feel free to share with your teammates and coaches, whoever may have missed this meeting. But we look forward to seeing you later this week. Have a good night.